Chapter 2. Ben watched for the plane. His father was coming home. For much of his youth, Ben had strained to see black and silver fighter planes coming out of cloud banks or winging down like huge birds of prey from heights where an eye could not go unless it was extraordinarily keen or the day was very clear. He had lost count how many times he had waited beside landing strips, scanning the sky for the approach of his father, his tall, jacketed father, to drop out of the sky, descending into the sight of his waiting family. A family who over the long years had developed patient eyes, sky-filled eyes, wing-blessed eyes. As a child, Ben had not understood why he had to stare so long and hard into a sky as vast as the sea to call the mysterious appearance of the man who had fathered him, the man who could do what angels did in the proving grounds of gods, the man who had fought unseen wars 5 miles above the earth. But Ben's eye had sharpened with practice and age. By instinct now it responded to the slanting wing, the dark, enlarging speck growing each moment, lowering and coming toward Ben and his family, whose very destinies were fastened to the humming frames of jets. Now, as he watched, Ben wondered how much his father had changed in a year, or how much his father could change in a year or a lifetime. He lowered his eyes and looked around at his mother, his brother, and 2 sisters. All of them were looking up toward the north, where the transport plane would come. The plane bearing the father who had flown off an aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean for a year. A sense of excitement flowed through the family like a common blood. Ben's mother stroked her hair with the nervous, raking motion of her hand. She caught Ben's eye and smiled. "You look beautiful, Mama," Ben said, winking at her. "Thank you, darling," his mother answered. "Get your shoulders back, you're slouching again. That's it. Now you're standing like a soldier. All right, children, let's say another Hail Mary that Dad's plane will have a safe flight." "We've already said 5 Hail Marys, Mom," Mary Ann Meacham said to her mother. "This is turning into a novena fast." Lillian Meacham disregarded her daughter's objection, and in a clear, lyrical voice filled with the soft music of Southern speech, prayed to the Virgin. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." The voices of her children joined her in an uneven chorus that lacked some of the fire and fervor of the first 5 prayers for their father's safe and punctual return. A steady breeze came from the south. The family stood huddled outside the control tower of Smythe Field, a washed-out naval air station outside of Atlanta, Georgia. A windsock at the end of the field, swollen with moderate gusts, pointed like an absurd finger past the control tower and to the far runway. As lifetime students of windsocks and their essential reliable messages, the family knew from which direction the plane would be coming, knew that planes and pilots were bound by simple laws of physics and would land according to the wind. The windsock reminded Ben of one of his father's sayings: "If you ever meet a man as truthful as a windsock, you have just met a hell of a man." Then he would add, "You've also met a real dumbass." Near the lone hangar, lethargic mechanics in grease-stained uniforms poked among the entrails of decrepit jets far removed from their vintage years. 3 jets with their wings folded were parked like maimed insects awaiting rebirth among the tools and oils of the men who swarmed over the broken open jet in the hangar. The hangar itself emitted a dark, wet smell like a cave, and the pale, voiceless men who swarmed therein seemed imprisoned in the huge shade, grease-ruled men who worked on planes once a month when their reserve units were on duty. "If Dad's plane crashed, we'd never forgive ourselves for not having said that one extra Hail Mary," Mrs. Meacham said. "I don't really think it works that way, Mom," Mary Ann said. "Well, I'm glad we said it anyway," her mother answered, eyeing the men working in the hangar. "You can tell this isn't a Marine base. There's no spirit here, no esprit de corps." "That's what I like about this base," Mary Ann said. "What is that supposed to mean, young lady?" "It's relaxed here. Marines aren't good at relaxing." "But they're the best at some very important things," Mrs. Meacham said. "Like hitting," Ben said. "They're great at hitting their kids." "Ben," Mrs. Meacham said sternly. "I was joking, Mom. That was just an attempt to add a little levity." I meant they're the best at waging war. You'll thank your lucky stars if this country's ever attacked. They're the greatest fighting force in the whole world. Let's say Hail Mary for our lucky stars, Marianne said, suppressing a giggle. Hush your foolishness, Marianne, Mrs. Meacham said, lightening up and smiling. Y'all ain't serious about anything. I don't want to leave Atlanta, Mama, Ben heard his younger sister whine to his mother. I'm going to run away if I have to leave Atlanta. I know you don't want to leave, Dumpling, but we must. Your father has orders. Lillian Meacham replied, her voice sad with understanding. I'll never see Belinda or Kate or Tina or even Louise again. We'll be back for visits. That's what you said when we left Cherry Point, Karen answered. We'll get back to Cherry Point someday. That's what you said when we left Camp Lejeune, too. We'll get back to Camp Lejeune someday, Mrs. Meacham said, her eyes hunting for her husband's plane again, her voice trailing off into a slurred whisper. We'll get back there, I promise. Now, help me watch for your father's plane. You're absolutely right, Karen, Marianne said to her sister matter-of-factly. You'll never see Belinda or Kate or Tina or Louise again. They're as good as dead. Don't you start spreading dissension, Marianne. I want Dad's homecoming to be absolutely perfect. Yes, ma'am, Marianne said. Then, in a whispered aside to Karen, she said, They're all dead, Karen. They're as good as dead. But don't worry. You'll make lots of new friends in this town we're moving to. Wonderful friends. Then Dad will get orders again, and they'll all be dead, too. Mama, Karen squealed. Marianne's trying to spread dissension. Matthew, the younger brother who had been monitoring the entire conversation, shouted to his mother, Hey, Mom, you want me to punch Marianne? If you punch me, midget, they'll be burying you in a matchbox that same night. Did you hear that, Mom? Marianne's teasing me about being small again. Marianne, stop that right now. You're not that small, Matt. You're practically a giant for a midget. I'm going to slap you if you don't hush. Okay, I'm hushing. You're lucky Mom stopped me, pig face, or I'd have had to hurt you bad, Matt said. Yeah, I was worrying about you jumping up as high as you could and hitting me on the knee. Come on, Marianne, let's take a walk up the runway while we're waiting for Dad. Splendid idea, Ben, Mrs. Meacham agreed. That's true form, perfect brother, the great peacemaker. You rack up brownie points with Mom and maintain the image of the perfect son. Ben and Marianne began to walk slowly to the northern end of the runway beside the wire fence that paralleled the strip. The voices of their family dimmed with every step. As he walked, Ben looked for the plane again and listened for the old buzzing sound, the old familiar anthem of an approaching plane to announce the descent of his father. You see anything yet? Marianne asked. Yes, I do, Ben said, a smile inching along his face. I sure do see something, if my eyes aren't playing tricks, he said, rubbing his eyes with disbelief. I see 14 passenger pigeons, a squadron of Messerschmitts over there. I see Jesus Christ rising from the dead, Mary being assumed into heaven. I see a horde of Mongols, Babe Ruth taking a shit, and a partridge in a pear tree. I mean, do you see anything interesting? Marianne answered, unemotionally. By the way, Ben, how long have you been waiting for me to ask that question? Oh, about 8 months. I thought so, Marianne replied. You have very limited powers of spontaneous thought. I knew you thought that up a long time ago. I maul you when it's just my mind against your mind. Baloney, you know it's true. I have a quicker mind and you just won't admit it. Might be a little quicker by a minute, but I want you to remember I can knock every tooth out of your head whenever I want to. There's nothing you can do about it. Big, brave Jock, big, handsome He-Man Jock. I admit you could do it, but I get you back. How? I'd sneak in your bathroom and steal your tube of Clearasil. I figure that without Clearasil, your pimples will multiply so fast, you'd be dead within 48 hours. Your cruelty knows no bounds. Of course not. I like to win arguments. In fact, I always win arguments. Back to the subject. Have you noticed how bad your face has been breaking out lately? It's not that bad, Marianne. When you talk about it, I start feeling like a gosh darn leper, Ben said, slightly irate. I've seen lepers who look a lot better than you do. You know, Ben, if Jesus were alive today, I'd go to him as he preached beside the Jordan, throw myself at his feet. I'd intercede for you. I'd say, Master, you must cure my brother of his maggot face. His name is Benjamin. He likes to be perfect and kiss ass. If you think you're working miracles by curing those lepers, Jesus, my boy, I'll show you a face that will make leprosy look like kid stuff. This will be the greatest challenge of your ministry, Jesus, to cure Ben Meacham, the boy whose face is one big goob. A sailor with a transistor radio blaring from his back hip pocket passed near Ben and Marianne. The long, pure notes of a clarinet spelled out into the Georgia sunshine as Mr. Ackerbilk played Strangers on the Shore. The song ended, replaced immediately by Neil Sedaka's Breaking Up Is Hard to Do. Both of them stopped talking until the music and the sailor faded out of earshot. Yes, Ben sighed philosophically. Breaking up is hard to do. How would you know? You've never gone with anybody. Neither of you. That's what you know. Boys are constantly lusting after my body. Oh, yeah. I've seen your body cause other emotions like nausea, but never lust. Let's talk about your nose for a while. I surrender. Gosh, with you talking about my skin and my nose, you're going to make me sensitive about my looks. As they began the long walk back to their mother, the heavy languor of the afternoon soaking into them, Ben studied his mother. Lillian Meacham was a stunningly beautiful woman of 37. Time had encircled her softly, enriched and deepened her beauty as the years tiptoed past her. Her hair was long, a dark, luxuriant red, swept to one side of her head and half covering her right eye. A haughty, insouciant mane that added a touch of ingenuous naughtiness to a face that otherwise had the innocence of a Madonna. Her face was a reflection of many things, a sum of many transfiguring, even violent events. Her smile was joyous, but the joy was fringed with grief. Her lips were full and passionate, her nose mischievous and arrogant. In her face, hardening experiences were registered in soft places. Pain was exiled to the nearly invisible lines shooting out from the eyes. Grief radiated in tight stars from both sides of her mouth. These wrinkles were the only indications that the face had suffered and that time had left at least a few footprints in passage. It was a kind face, a face that sons could love, husbands worship, and daughters envy. Her body was firm, ripe, and full. It had rich curves that invited the secret scholarship of men's eyes. She had borne 4 children and suffered 3 miscarriages, but her stomach was as hard and flat as her hand. From a distance of 100 yards, Ben saw her speaking to Karen and Matthew. She spoke with her hands, entertaining her 2 youngest children, with fluid movements of such consummate grace that it seemed as though light music should be filtering from somewhere in the dizzying late afternoon heat. Her fingers could speak individual words. They were long and slender. Each nail was richly translucent and sculpted into the small white eighth moons where her file had worked. She had more vanity about her hands and her stomach than any other parts of her body. But Ben had watched his mother change as the day approached for his father to return from his year's journey overseas. It was a universal law in military families that mothers could not maintain the strict discipline enforced by fathers, to whom discipline was a religion and a way of life. When the military man left for a year, the whole family relaxed in a collective yet unvoiced sigh. For a year, there was a looseness, a freedom from tension, a time when martial law was suspended. Though a manless house was an uncompleted home, and though the father was keenly missed, there was a laxity and fragile vigor that could not survive his homecoming. Lillian Meacham was not a disciplinarian, but as the day of her husband's return neared, she knew instinctively that she had to harden into a vestigial imitation of her husband, so his arrival would not be too much of a shock to her children. His hand had traditionally been very heavy when he returned from overseas, so intent was he on reestablishing codes of discipline and ensuring that the children marched to his harsher cadences. For the last month, she had been preparing them. She conducted unannounced inspections, yelled frequently, scolded often, and had even slapped Matthew when he argued about one of her directives. Tension flowed like a Blackwater creek through the family as the day of Colonel Meacham's arrival neared. The change of command ceremony took place the moment his plane arrived at Smythe Field. Lillian Meacham would hand the household over to her husband without a single word passing between them. Marianne had a very different face from her mother's. Her face was wise, freckled, and touchingly vulnerable. Thick glasses diminished somewhat its natural prettiness. The gaudy frames of the glasses were cheap, drawing attention to features that needed no heavy emphasis. She was much shorter than her mother and seemed chunky and ungainly in comparison. Her breasts were large and full, but she dressed in loose-fitting, tent-like clothes so as to not draw attention to herself. Because of the thick glasses, her eyes had a bloated appearance, as though they were both trapped in a goldfish bowl. Her eyes were precisely the same blue as her mother's, but they nursed a wisdom and hurt strange to find in so young a girl. She opened a compact as she walked along and dabbed at several faded freckles. Never in her life had she liked the stories told by mirrors. The wind picked up, died, and picked up again. It was a wind that offered no relief from the heat, but it caught Lillian's hair and pushed it softly back, an auburn shining pennant, a surrogate windsock revealing a long, elegant neck. "Mom looks beautiful today, doesn't she?" Ben said without looking at his sister. Marianne frowned and said, "Yeah, Oedipus. She always looks beautiful. What else is new?" "She must have spent a lot of time dolling up for Dad." "About 2 weeks, I'd say. She had her hair done, her nails done, her eyes done, and her clothes done. The only thing wrong is she couldn't have her children done." "Do you think she's excited about Dad coming home?" "Yes," Marianne answered. "She loves to creep like all of us. She's afraid of him, but like all of us, she loves him. I read all of his letters to her. They're full of disgusting sexual references. It's very psychosexual." "You read Dad's letters?" Ben said, amazed. "Mom would kill you if she knew that." "It's my duty to keep informed. I will tell you one lewd but fascinating piece of information. He refers to his penis as Mr. Cannon and her vagina as Miss Nancy. Isn't that lovely? It made me want to puke. I would advise you, dear sister, not to slip up and call Dad Mr. Cannon sometime, and I would never refer to Miss Nancy under any circumstances. But what the hell, I bet it's hard for a husband and wife to be separated for a whole year. I know it gets lonely for Mom, but gosh knows we need these breaks from Dad once in a while. I've got 1 year left with the big fella before I'm home free." "Dad is the most interesting person I've ever met," Marianne said thoughtfully. "The fist prints on my jaw can attest to that." "I don't mean that. He's hard to figure out. He loves his family more than anything in the world except the Marine Corps. Yet none of us has ever had a real conversation with him." "Well, it's been a good year without him. I've loved being at Mama's." "Anything would be a good year compared to the one before he left for Europe." "It was definitely not a banner year, but that's over. Mom says he's changed a lot since he's been gone. He evidently missed us a lot." "I missed him too, kind of." "So have I," Ben said with difficulty. "Kind of." Then, suddenly he said, "I hear a plane." Far off, the quiet percussion of an approaching plane resonated over the field. Ben and Marianne sprinted the remaining distance to where their mother stood with Matthew and Karen. Ben ran backward, trying to catch the first glimpse of the plane, watching for the sharp reflection of sunlight off a wing or cockpit window, but still he could not see it. The buzz of the plane seemed to fill the whole sky and came from no one source. It grew louder, more defined. When they finally reached Mrs. Meacham, she was smiling. "I see it," she said simply. "Where?" Ben cried. "I haven't seen it yet." "It's at 2 o'clock just below that big cloud." I see it," Matt shouted. "There's Daddy's plane," Karen squealed, jumping up and down in her new ruffled dress and patent leather shoes. Marianne was staring blankly toward the noise. From long experience, she knew that the plane was not in her range of vision, nor would it be for several minutes. "I still don't see the gosh darn thing," Ben whispered to Marianne. "Don't feel like the Lone Ranger," Marianne answered. "I won't be able to see it until I'm hit by one of the wings." "Why don't you turn those glasses of yours around and use them as binoculars?" "Very funny." "Seriously, I tried that once with your glasses. For the first time, I saw the rings of Saturn." Then he shouted suddenly, "There's the plane. I was looking right at the thing. I must be getting rusty." Lily and Meacham gather her children around her to choreograph the homecoming. Stand up straight, Ben and Matt, shoulders back, like Marines. Matthew, let me comb your hair. Girls, check your makeup. We want to be beautiful for your father. When he gets off the plane, we'll all run to meet him. I'll go first, followed by the girls, then the boys. I'll give him a big juicy. Then the girls will give him big juicies. Boys, you shake his hand firmly, very firmly like men, then say, "Welcome home, Colonel." We better get a chair for the midget to stand on. Marianne teased. Matt will end up shaking hands with Dad's belly button if we don't give him a lift. You heard her, Mama. You heard her call me a midget. Marianne, Mrs. Meacham called sternly. Yes, ma'am. Marianne answered, be a lady. The eyes of the airbase turned in the direction of the fat-bodied transport plane that was bringing foodstuffs and airplane parts to Smythefield and Bull Meacham back to his family. It lowered steadily to the earth, flaps down, nose up, until the wheels screamed along the concrete and a black seam of rubber burned into the runway, marking the final leg on Colonel Meacham's journey home. As the plane taxied toward the operations tower where the family waited, a fuel truck sputtered into life by the hangar and rolled slowly toward the plane. The door of the plane opened and steps were lowered. A man in uniform appeared in the doorway. He looked out, saw his family, and bellowed out to them with a large, exuberant smile, "Stand by for a fighter pilot." Yes, as they ran to him, that echo from past memories rang in their brains. That password into the turbulent cellular structure of the past, the honeycomb of lost days of laughter and fury that told them as they ran to his outstretched arms a simple message. Lieutenant Colonel Bull Meacham, United States Marine Corps, was back from Europe. The father had landed. The great Santini was home.